she was different. You know, she was the only woman, and that was a men's club, so women weren't allowed, and they didn't want her. They didn't want her. They didn't want a woman.
She was really the only truly practicing female attorney in St. Joseph.
Grace is an icon, plain and simple.
I think it's hard to define. I think the impact that she's had, she'll never know. I'm not sure anybody will ever know. I think the example that she set and the role model that she was unintentional, but very, very profound.
I was born in Ottawa, Iowa.
Grace Day grew up Grace Steinberg, the daughter of Polish immigrants who journeyed to America after World War I in search of a better life.
My father had a shoe store, and I used to work in there, sold shoes from the time I was pretty little until I went away to school.
Grace had ambition beyond the family business. During her teen years and through college, Grace excelled in speech, dramatics, and debate. Those experiences led her to enroll in law school, where she was not the first woman, but during her time in the late 1940s, the only woman. There were no legal role models in Grace's hometown in Iowa. In South Dakota, she would need every bit of her Midwestern mettle to guide her through the demands in and out of the classroom.
Most of the male students were a little older because they had been to the war and they'd come back to college.
While Grace was ready for law school, the law school wasn't ready for her.
It was well known around campus that any woman that started law school is not going to be there long. She'd get flunked out. And when I started, I was the only woman in the law school.
Being the lone woman immediately set Grace apart from the 175 male students. She was repeatedly taunted, and even though the unpleasant acts occurred more than 6 decades ago, the memories are still vivid for her today.
The one thing that still stands out in my mind that I can feel today is this one sort of portly guy who would come up with his beer stubble and give me a whisker rub on my cheek and just grab me and do that. And I didn't care too much for him in the first place, and that was agonizing. And I can still remember like that was yesterday.
While the likable Grace had friends, she was often excluded from typical social gatherings. With the lack of appropriate living quarters, she resided nearby in the women's dorm at the university. Her professors weren't quite sure how to handle the bright young woman who had dared to step foot in what was then a male-dominated profession.
You could just tell by their demeanor that they were very unhappy, and they would have a room where the guys would come in the morning or when they had a free period and they'd play cribbage. I had never heard of cribbage before. And it was like, and this one professor particularly that didn't have a like for women in law school, played a lot of cribbage with the male law students, and it was like that room was forbidden.
The rejection wasn't only during social hours. In class, Grace felt the professor's lack of enthusiasm for her presence, and occasionally she became fodder for their jokes. In one instance, her male peers placed bets on whether she would attend class when the subject matter was considered inappropriate for the fairer sex at the time.
My domestic relations class, I had a fairly young professor, and he was very nice. And they were going to discuss what under today's standard would be a nothing case, but at that time it was very sexual. It was about a penetration case and what that meant and etc. So the guys were taking bets, I didn't know this till afterwards, whether I would show up in class for the discussion. Well, I figured, shoot, I'm there. It's a class and it's an assignment. I'm going. Well, I think the professor was hoping also I didn't come because he thought maybe it was going to be embarrassing. But, you know, it was part of the academic class. But I didn't know about the bets that the guys were taking until afterwards.